Be seated, please. I just have it, Jerry. All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Agent Shoudel, before lunch, we were discussing your interview with John McCullough on January 26, 2018.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we were discussing Mr. McCullough's description of the white F-150 that he had been driving while on Exodus in Occipital.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And he described that truck to you as an F-150 single cab, long bed, manual transmission.
Correct.
Okay. Do you recall off the top of your head whether or not it was in fact a long bed and whether or not it had a manual transmission?
I don't recall. I don't remember.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to hand you some photos. Recognize those as the ones that came to you from the insurance company?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Those photos show a vehicle that has an automatic transmission.
Correct.
Okay. So Mr. McCullough was wrong about the manual transmission. That also appears to be a regular size bed as opposed to a long bed.
I'm not a truck expert, nor, is it scaled with a scale there so I could say it is or isn't. It does look like a shorter bed truck. It is a single cab.
Very good, thank you. Mr. McCullough told you that while in Ocilla on Exodus, he was hanging out at a friend's house, a friend of Beau's, where he saw a helicopter searching the area. Now, he didn't mention that to you in his first interview, did he?
No.
Okay. Law enforcement flights, there are records maintained of those, correct?
I would hope so.
Very good.
I mean, we don't fly. GBI doesn't have flights.
Sure.
We use like GSP or other entities, and I would imagine that they keep logs of their flights.
Did you ever uncover any evidence whatsoever that there were helicopters flying over someone's house in 2006? There in Ocilla, as described by Mr.
I did get
McCullough?
some records pertaining to overflights during this case. I can't give you the exact dates, but 2005, 2006, but I can't say what every little flight was for.
Sure. Do you remember telling Mr. McCullough during that interview you never saw helicopters, I'm certain?
Yes, I did ask him about that, because he mentioned that one of the people whose houses they were going to hang out was a suspected drug dealer or something like that, and helicopters would fly, and I think I chuckled because that's an unusual statement, but
Sure. Not something that seemed accurate at the time.
just unusual.
And he gives you a story, he reiterates a story on 2018 to you, and this time he tells you that Mr. Duke says a buddy came over. Mm-hmm. He says, Mr. Duke says, the buddy says, I fucked up. I need to borrow your truck. I accidentally killed her after an argument.
Yes.
Correct? Unlike the first conversation you had with him in 2014, he's no longer stating that it was the boyfriend who
Correct.
killed Miss Grinstead.
Correct. And I may have even asked him during the interview at some point, I'm pretty certain I did, have you seen the media coverage? I think I asked him, have you seen the media coverage, because I wanted him to say whether or not he had seen or recognized Ryan Duke as somebody who they were hanging out with at the time. And he said, I believe he said it wasn't. He named some other people. Or
Okay.
I sent him photographs of other people, and he pointed these people out, and so that's how I knew who he was referring to.
Okay. But between the 2016 interview and the 2018 interview with Mr. McCullough, as the story had broke, the public news made it clear that it was not a boyfriend that had killed Miss Grinstead.
I can't say every news story, but yeah, it was, I'm pretty certain, and I can't say for sure that that's what they said, but I think it was pretty well known that it was somebody that wasn't connected to her or dated her on the onset.
In this interview, in the 2018 interview, this time he tells you the body was taken to Dukes' uncle's pecan orchard.
Yes.
That's not a detail he relayed to you in the first interview.
No, he just said pecan orchard.
That's right. In saying it was the uncle's pecan orchard, that's a very specific, particular detail. That's
Yes.
something that would have stood out to you.
Correct.
That's also a detail that had since become available publicly since the 2016 interview as the story broke after the arrest in 2017.
Once again, I'm not a member of the media, so I can't, and I didn't see every single news article. I would maybe say that's true, but I can't say 100% that that's true.
That's not a fact that had been withheld, kept secret, kept internal to the GBI.
That it was his uncle's. I'm pretty certain it came out at some point after we were doing the sites and everything that there was a connection made between Bo and his family, whether it's his uncle or his grandfather.
In fact, as that story broke, there were this news media there at the orchard.
Yes.
Forensics were being done.
Yes.
I believe there may have even been media trying to fly drones or other things over to get footage.
There were.
Later in that interview, Mr. McCullough tells you, the 2018 interview, that Dukes told him exactly where it happened, and that location was his grandpa's pecan orchard.
Yeah, I think he said grandpa and or uncle.
Okay. But again, and this is something that you wrote down in your notes,
Right.
this information, again, it's a very important detail, something very specific.
Yes.
That wasn't in the first interview, was it?
No.
And again, that was a detail that had become available as the news on this story was breaking.
Correct.
All right. McCullough tells you in this 2018 statement that Bo told him during basic training, during the 4 weeks they had been at Fort Sill together before Exodus, quote, it takes 1,200 degrees to burn a human body. Correct?
I'm not saying that that was at the basic training. He's referring to the same time, the Exodus time, that I believe it to be.
Okay, so in your interviews with Mr. McCullough, you do not recall him relaying to you that any comments had been made during basic training at Fort Sill, but had been made during the ride while they were here on Exodus that he had described to you about that?
I believe, yeah. I think I was, because we were just doing follow-ups. I was, at that point, he may have meant something that I didn't understand, or it may have been a misunderstanding, but I perceived it to be just during the Exodus time.
Okay.
I don't know that I followed up with him. He mentioned that about dry, so I just probably assumed that he was referring to that specific time, and I don't recall that I asked him if it was outside of the Exodus time. I think we were just focused on the Exodus time.
Okay. So to your recollection, he never communicated to you in 2016 or 2018 that they had had any discussions directly, indirectly concerning this case when they were at Fort Sill for the 4 weeks they'd been together in basic training before Exodus.
Yeah, definitely. I'm almost certain he said definitely nothing prior to the Exodus. Like I said, there may have been conversations that they had that he didn't relay to me or I was privy to after returning to basic training. I think the only thing he said that I recall from post-returning Exodus is a drug screen failure or something like
Correct.
that.
In fact, in neither of those reports does it indicate he relayed to you that they had any conversation whatsoever about the situation after they got back to Fort Sill and before they graduated basic.
Not that he relayed to me, no.
Okay. And of course, you expected him to be transparent with you, give you as much detail as possible. That was the point of the 2018 interview. Yes,
to be more, to try to lock in more specific facts. The first time he calls, it's a very general, he's giving me fact. We have the benefit of a little more knowledge. Like I said, I sent him photographs that we learned about after the fact for verification purposes. He definitely gave more detail in this interview than he did in the first one.
And he didn't strike you as a reluctant witness, somebody who was going to withhold information or minimize information. He seemed pretty cooperative and he wanted to talk with you.
He seemed like it on the telephone. And to mention what you said, usually when I'm pretty certain I said it during this interview, and I usually say it almost, is there anything that I haven't covered? Anything you think I should know? Is there anything I missed? Just to leave that door open, same thing I did with Mr. Dukes during his interview. Anything I've left open? Anything that I haven't thought to ask? Anything you think is important?
Okay, thank you. Now, during the 2018 interview, he did tell you that he had called police department sometime in 2008, 2009.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
In the 2018 interview, Mr. McCullough informed you that he had tried to call law enforcement, local law enforcement,
Right.
somewhere between 2008 and 2009.
Correct. He said, and this is my words, McCullough did say he contacted someone in the local police or the sheriff's office sometime in 2008 or 2009, but didn't remember who he spoke to. He said no one ever contacted him back.
All right. Were you ever able to verify with any local police departments that they'd ever been contacted by someone named John McCullough?
No.
All right.
Well, I mean, yes, I asked, but no, they never heard of his name.
Sure. Okay. And during the 2018 interview, McCullough did not tell you that he had sent a Facebook message to a group which was trying to find Miss Grinstead.
No.
All right. And had he done so, you would have been able to contact that group and either use your subpoena powers or have them voluntarily pull that message to corroborate that that happened.
Chances are you probably wouldn't have the message from a subpoena. We would have followed up with the people that they named.
Okay.
Or
It's certainly something that could have been obtained had you been given a heads up about it.
as far as the information at
Yes,
the
sir.
time, yeah, it's something we could have followed up with immediately.
Okay, great. And Mr. McCullough didn't tell you in 2018 that he had called the GBI multiple times with no response.
No.
During that 2018 interview, Mr. McCullough told you that he and Mr. Dukes had not seen each other since graduation from basic in 2006.
That's what he said.
Okay. During your investigation, you haven't uncovered any calls between Mr. McCullough or Mr. Dukes from 2006 until, let's see, today.
No.
Okay. Haven't uncovered any kind of text, Facebook messages, any type of communication between them whatsoever.
No.
Okay. Now, I know when you were interviewing Mr. McCullough in 2018, you had sent him, I believe you texted him, some photos of the truck as you guys were talking in order to see if you could verify those photos.
Correct. Some of these similar, maybe one or two of these.
Okay. Has Mr. McCullough ever sent you any information by text or by email?
No. Other than that day when I sent him the, those, and then we did text back and forth in the last couple weeks, just as it related to, hey, somebody from the DA's office is trying to get in touch with you. Those messages are there, but nothing about the case.
There's some logistical messages. Someone's going to contact you. You need to be at this place on this date.
I just mentioned that somebody from the district attorney's office was reaching out to him. They were looking to get in touch with him.
Just a courtesy heads up.
Yes.
Okay. But there haven't been any substantive text in terms of additional information beyond the 2014 or 2018 interviews that he gave?
2016.
I'm sorry,
2018.
2016, 2018 interviews.
Yes, sir. None.
Thank you, Agent.
Yes, sir. You want your pictures?
Mr. Rigby, you wish to redirect?
I do, Your Honor. Agent Shoudel, something I left off, we talked about your prior law enforcement service. Back in 2016, when you became case agent for this particular case, were you a post-certified law enforcement officer at that time?
Well, when I became the case agent in 2009, yes, I was.
All right.
But at the time of this, yes, I was also.
And have you been post-certified throughout your law enforcement career?
Yes, since 1999.
And you currently post-certified at today, as we're testifying today?
Yes.
When I say post-certified, what exactly does that mean?
The Georgia Police Officer and Standards and Training Council, we attend training to become a certified law enforcement officer for the state of Georgia. The course that I took in Tifton it was from October, I can't remember the exact day, I think October the 4th, 1999 to December the 20th, 1999, I attended the Basic Academy in Tifton and became certified at that academy. I think it's a 400-hour academy. And then when I became a GBI agent in 2007, I attended the GBI Training Academy, which was another 16 weeks. I think it's 600 plus hours of training just for those two certification courses. And the Post-Standard Training Council, they recognize that as a certification to become a certified law enforcement officer. It gives you the ability to become an officer or to be an officer, but you have to be sworn in or appointed by either a local department or state agency or sheriff's office to actually have the powers of arrest that goes along with it.
Now, Mr. Fox had asked you about a couple of things, that is specifically that through your investigation, it was never confirmed, and since we have it, the name of Ryan Alexander Duke without an S and Bo Dukes with an S, I just want to make sure that the jury is clear on that your investigation with regard to Bo Duke's DNA has never been confirmed with regard to any evidence in the case. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Agent Shoudel, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 61, and ask if you'll look at that, please. It's 2 pages.
Sure. Okay.
Are you familiar with what State's Exhibit number 61 is?
I am.
And what is State's Exhibit 61?
State's Exhibit number 61 is a printed copy of my investigative summary generated from the interview with John McCullough on June the 14th, 2016 at 11:57 a.m. through 12:24 p.m.
Now, this summary is about that interview, June 14th, you were just calling back to get information about a tip that was called into the GBI, is that right?
Right, he had called into the office, talked with, I'm assuming, Agent Holland, Logan Holland, who gave me his name and telephone number, said give him a call.
Is that a true and accurate summary of the summary that you made from the interview that you did with Mr. McCullough from that phone call June 14th of 2016?
Yes, it is.
Judge, at this time, I would tender State's Exhibit number 61.
Your Honor, I would object to State's Exhibit number 61. This is simply a summary of the agent's interview. We've had the testimony of the agent as to his conversations with Mr. McCullough. We've had Mr. McCullough's testimony as to what he told the agent. This simply is not probative and would allow essentially further testimony to keep occurring back in the jury room in deliberations.
But I've said nothing about it going out to the jury. I believe that Mr. Fox has cross-examined Agent Shoudel about those things that were said in that interview with Agent Shoudel, and I think that they're certainly entitled to have them and have them put into evidence.
Your Honor, again, this is a summary. The jury can hear the testimony of the agent as to what happened, what was said, and what was recalled, but again, this is just a summary and an interpretation. We don't need it to
I think that's a
substitute.
separate issue, though, whether it goes out with the jury or not.
Okay.
But there's been some extensive cross-examination by you about the
There is, Your Honor.
about the summary itself.
Pardon?
I said there's been some extensive cross-examination you about his case summary on that date.
Correct. But he's also testified about what had occurred, what was said, what he recalls from it. We just object that this would be a proper exhibit to go out.
The problem with that is it's not complete because everything that was in that summary was not gone through by Mr. Fox. I would like for the jury to have a complete recommendation of what that summary entails.
All right, I'm going to admit it, subject to any objection to it going out with the jury.
Thank you.
All right.
Agent Shoudel, showing you State's Exhibit number 61. If you will, if you will read that for me, please, sir.
You want me to read the whole thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It says Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Region 13, Investigative Case Summary, Case Number 13-0070-25-06, which is the Tara Grinstead case file number. It says on Thursday, June the 14th, 2016, at approximately 11:57 a.m., Special Agent Jason Shoudel contacted and interviewed John McCullough via telephone, 832-614-0363, pursuant to the current investigation. McCullough had contacted the GBI Region 13 field office and said he had information regarding the investigation into Tara Grinstead's disappearance. The interview could not be recorded as it was completed via telephone. During the interview, McCullough stated essentially the following. Sorry. You ready? Okay. During the Christmas 2006 holidays, McCullough was in basic training in the Army at Fort Sill Army Base, Oklahoma, with Bo Dukes. McCullough came to Ocilla, Georgia with Dukes for the holidays. While in Ocilla, McCullough hung out with Dukes and his family. McCullough and Dukes drove around the Ocilla area in Dukes' mother's BMW convertible, and McCullough borrowed a truck, a white Ford F-150 long bed to drive. While riding around with Dukes, McCullough was told several odd statements. Dukes said, in quotes, "You're my battle buddy, right?" to McCullough, indicating a bond of friendship and closeness. and I have in parentheses, you don't tell on each other. Duke said, quote, "It takes about 2,000 degrees to burn a body, but pecan wood burns really hot," end quote. Dukes only made those statements after he and McCullough viewed missing persons posters of Grinstead posted around Ocilla. Duke said he had been contacted by Grinstead's boyfriend to help him. Dukes did not say the name of the boyfriend. Dukes drove the white Ford F-150 truck and met Grinstead's boyfriend, loaded Grinstead's deceased body into the back, took it to the pecan orchard, then burned it to nothing. Duke said they did not pick up Grinstead's body from her house, but some other location. Dukes indicated it had happened the day before she was reported missing, which is Sunday. Duke said Grinstead's boyfriend, again, had gotten upset and jealous at Grinstead, which provoked an argument leading to a physical altercation in which Grinstead was beaten or strangled. McCullough waited this long to follow up with the GBI because he believed Dukes may have been intoxicated during those conversations and just talking bolstered. McCullough could not provide any further information at the time, and the interview was concluded at 12:24 p.m. McCullough indicated he would cooperate with S.A. Shoudel in any other matter concerning the investigation, and then the rest is his ID data. If you want me to read that, I can.
That's okay. So this is the information, the summary that you took from the interview you did with him on June 14th. Is that right?
It is, correct.
And as a result of the June 14th, 2016 interview, you went and interviewed Bo Dukes 2 days later on June 16th of 2016. Is that
I
right?
did.
I'm going to show you the marked as State's Exhibit number 62. Ask if you'll look at that.
Yes.
What is State's Exhibit 62?
State's Exhibit number 62 is an investigative summary that I generated from the Friday, January the 26th, 2018 interview with John McCullough.
Now, with regard to this interview in 2018, this was a recorded interview, is that correct?
It was.
And with regard to that, I'm going to direct your attention to State's Exhibit number 61, being the exhibit from the summary of the June 14th, 2016 interview. Now, in the 2018 interview, how does Mr. McCullough refer to the person that killed Ms. Grinstead?
In this one?
In the 2018 interview, yes, sir. I guess let me do it this way. Does he refer to the person that killed Ms. Grinstead as a boyfriend?
No.
How does he refer to the person in the 2018 interview?
And I'm just going through to make sure. Give me just a second, I'm sorry. He called him his friend. Dukes told McCullough he reluctantly decided to help his friend.
So there's a change from a boyfriend to a friend, is that right?
Yes.
Now, with regard to the 2016 interview, with regard to a certain number or level of degrees for burning, what did he tell you in 2016 according to your summary? 2016,
he said 2,000 degrees.
And when you spoke with him in 2018 on the recorded interview, what did he tell you the degrees or level of heat would be?
1,200.
And in both the 2016 statement as well as the 2018 statement, where was the location he describes as being where was the location regarding where Ms. Grinstead's body was and where it was burned?
In both statements, it was the orchard, or referenced the orchard. Once again, there's in both, in this one, he was more descriptive about like ownership or what he'd heard ownership of the orchard. And then this one, he just said orchard.
And as is the case, when you went back and did the second interview, I believe you said earlier that he gives many more details in the 2018 interview than he did in the previous interview in 2016.
He does.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Fox.
Do you need to tender this?
All right, you can step down.
Yes, sir, thank you.
You can just leave those.
Yes, sir. Well, one of them was tendered and one of them wasn't.
There's a request that he be allowed to remain in the courtroom.
I have no objection provided he's.
Okay, all right, you can remain. I can call you next witness.
State calls Paul Bowden. Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give before the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Can you tell us your name, please, sir?
My name is Paul Bowden.
If you'll spell your first and last name for the court, please.
Paul, P-A-U-L, Bowden, B-O-W-D-E-N.
And Mr. Bowden, how are you employed?
I am the district attorney in the Tifton Judicial Circuit.
Now, to be district attorney, what do you have to be to be a district attorney?
You have to practice law for 3 years and get elected or appointed and then elected.
And how long have you been the elected district attorney in the Tifton Judicial Circuit?
Since 1993, I'm in my 27th year.
Now, Mr. Bowden, I want to direct your attention to February the 19th of 2017 being a Sunday. Did you have an opportunity to meet with this defendant, Bo Dukes, as well as Mr. Fox with regard to this case involving the death of Tara Grinstead?
Yes, we met at the GBI regional office in Perry.
And who else was there at the GBI regional office in Perry when you, Mr. Dukes, as well as Mr. Fox were there?
An assistant district attorney from my office, Kim Schwalls, and you were there.
Okay. When you say you, being me,
The
right?
district attorney, Brad Rigby, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, with regard to that meeting, do you know who Agent Jason Shoudel is?
Yes.
And who is Agent Shoudel?
He, at the time, was a case agent in the Grinstead investigation, and he had arranged the meeting. He was also present
Okay. How was
in
it,
the office.
Mr. Bowden, that you needed to go to this meeting at the GBI office?
It was arranged by Agent Shoudel because of information he had gotten toward the end of the week. Tried to arrange it for a Saturday, which would have been the 18th, and I think Mr. Fox had a conflict. I had a conflict with Sunday, but I changed my conflict so that we could meet on Sunday morning.
Now, with regard to a meeting there at the GBI office, was Agent Shoudel present for this first meeting? And how was Agent Shoudel involved in that first part of the meeting?
He basically, he was there when we arrived, of course, to open the office. As I recall, you and I got there about the same time. I may have gotten there a little early. You did not ride with us that morning. Agent Shoudel was there, let us in. Mr. Fox and his client came shortly thereafter, and we were in a conference room in the GBI office, basically introduced to each other, and then Mr. Shoudel, or Agent Shoudel, excused himself, leaving just you, me, Ms. Schwalls, Mr. Fox, and Bo Dukes.
Now, with regard to this meeting there with Mr. Fox and Mr. Dukes, did you make any deals with Bo Dukes at that time about reduced charges?
No.
Did I make any deals with Mr. Dukes about reduced charges?
No.
Did you make any deals with Mr. Dukes about a lighter sentence?
No.
Did I make any deals with Mr. Dukes about a lighter sentence?
No.
Were any deals made with Mr. Dukes regarding any kind of sentence?
No.
By you or by me?
No.
Or by Assistant DA Kim Schwalls?
No.
Mr. Bowden, if you will explain, when we use the term like use immunity, will you explain that term for the jury, please?
Yes, use immunity is a statutory provision in Georgia that upon the request of a district attorney or the attorney general, the court will give what is known as use and derivative immunity to an individual. What that does is we can compel them to testify, but what they testify to, or anything we learn as a result of their testimony that we did not already know, cannot be used against them in a proceeding against them. What that does is it lets us have the evidence that they have without them incriminating themselves under the Fifth Amendment.
With regard to that, when you say testimony or testify, is that in a court proceeding?
Yes, grand jury, trial, hearing.
And with regard to this use immunity or derivative immunity, it does not affect any charges, it does not affect any sentence or hope of a lighter sentence?
No, it doesn't prevent them from being prosecuted if they're charged. It doesn't affect the outcome. The only thing it does is that we cannot use what they say against them in their trial.
And with regard to Mr. Duke, was there an agreement regarding use immunity about his testimony?
Yes, the only thing that Mr. Fox requested at that meeting was that if we needed Mr. Dukes to testify at grand jury or at trial, or I guess at any proceeding, that we get an immunity order to protect him.
Were there, other than that, were there any other agreements or deals made between Mr. Dukes, Mr. Fox, and yourself or with me?
No.
Was Mr. Dukes granted immunity for showing us where the body was, Sheriff Grinstead, or for confessing in this case?
No.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Mr. Fox?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Bowden.
Mr. Fox?
At that meeting, GBI, the morning of February 19, 2017, you explained some expectations to Mr. Dukes, correct?
That's correct.
You explained you expected him to be honest, not minimize anything, but tell everything that he knew.
That is correct.
You expected him to be transparent about his role.
That is correct.
You expected him to be transparent about the role of Ryan Duke.
That is correct.
You expected him to relay the names of every person who knew what had occurred.
That's correct, yes.
You expected him to cooperate with the forensic teams in order to locate the remains of Miss Grinstead.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
It was then you explained that if that occurred, you were in a position to help.
Yes.
Thereafter, the meeting concluded, and Mr. Duke spoke briefly with Agent Shoudel.
I was not present for any meeting between Mr. Dukes and Agent Shoudel, but my understanding is yes, I'm
That's
sure
correct,
that happened.
because after the meeting of the lawyers and Mr. Duke, everyone except for Mr. Duke and myself left the conference room, and then Agent Shoudel came back in.
I think that's correct, yes.
Thereafter, Mr. Duke met with the GBI on the 21st, 2017, and gave them a very long statement, which was videotaped, and then led them to an orchard to show them where he recalled the remains being left. Correct?
Yes. I mean, I was not present, but I'm familiar with the case and the file, and yes, that's correct.
That's correct. If I recall correctly, you were going out of town that Sunday.
That's right.
All right. Between Sunday the 19th and Mr. Dukes' interview on the 21st, there were no further communications between your office, Mr. Rigby's office, and our office.
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly not from my office.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
Mr. Rigby?
Had Mr. Dukes been given immunity, and would we be here today?
That's a hard question, depending on what he was given immunity for, but Mr. Dukes had agreed to talk before I ever went to Perry. My first question to him was, I understand that you want to cooperate and tell us what you know about the murder of Tara Grinstead. His response to me was yes. And I said, in that case, we expect you to tell us the truth about everything, everybody's involvement, including your own.
And has Mr. Duke testified at any hearing for you, Mr. Bowden?
No.
Thank you.
Anything, brother?
No regrets.
All right, you step.
Thank you.
You can call you next week.
Sorry. State calls Todd Crosby. Your Honor, may Mr. Bowden be excused?
Any objections?
Absolutely no objection.
All right, you're excused.
You raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear from the testimony you're about to give before the court in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
So tell us your name, please, sir.
Todd Crosby.
And Mr. Crosby, how are you employed?
I am employed with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in Perry.
If you'll spell your first and last name for the court reporter.
It's Todd, T-O-D-D, Crosby, C-R-O-S-B-Y.
How long have you been employed as an agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation?
18 years.
And what specifically do you do for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation?
I am the Assistant Special Agent in charge for the Perry office, as well as the Assistant Special Agent in charge over the GBI crime scene program.
Now, when we talk about a crime scene and crime scene program, are you also certified to handle and process crime scenes?
I worked crime scenes for 15 and a half years out in the field, and now in my position as the coordinator for the GBI crime scene program, I also go out still in the field if there's a very high-profile case. I also handle their training as well as their coordinating for equipment.
Okay. If you also, you've given us a little bit of that with the answer to that question. If you will give the jury the benefit of your training experience and allow you to do your job as a crime scene analyst.
When I started with the GBI in 2001, I was assigned to a field office in Eastman. In October of 2001, I was assigned to a crime scene position in Millersville. Since that time in 2001, I've went to over 1,800 hours of forensic training. 400 of those hours were advanced forensics training at the University of Tennessee's National Forensics Academy. A lot of folks may know that as the body form training. And that's where we received 400 hours or 10 weeks of training. In that, we also had the advanced training in bloodstain pattern analysis, shooting incident reconstruction, as well as clandestine grave recovery and latent print processing.
Now, with regard to your experience as a crime scene analyst, have you testified in court to this state regarding your analysis at a crime scene?
Yes, I have.
And about how many times have you done that, Agent Crosby?
More than 25.
Agent Crosby, I want to direct your attention to February 27th of 2017. Did you come to a location in Ben Hill County, Georgia, with regards to the case involving Tara Grinstead?
Yes, I did.
And what was your purpose of going to that to Ben Hill County on February 27th of 2017?
On February 27th, I was asked to come and meet with the owner of that property, Mr. Randy Hudson. Mr. Hudson was to show us an area and some pine trees where a burn had occurred in October of 2005, where he had seen where household trash and area had been burned there in the pine trees.
Now, in fact, did you meet with Mr. Hudson?
I was there when he was met with, yes, sir.
All right, and did Mr. Hudson take you, that is Mr. Randy Hudson, did he take you all to a location in those pine trees?
Yes, he did.
All right, and as a result of that, tell me what you did.
Mr. Hudson carried us into the pine trees. It was a logging road, and off of that logging road, there was two other logging roads. On a previous date, we had been down the first logging road. We had been shown an area there, and we had searched that area And on this date, on the 27th, when Mr. Hudson came out, he carried us to the second logging road and showed us this area. Once he had showed us the general area where this occurred, I used a technique called a witching technique. It's used for looking for bones. You want me to go ahead and go into how that works, Mr. Rigby?
Well, we'll come back to it, that's okay. I kind of skipped over that first part. So prior to you meeting with Mr. Hudson and Mr. Hudson showing you the location in the orchard and the pine trees, you said you had been there a previous day, is that right?
That's correct. On the 21st, which was the week prior, Mr. Bo Dukes had showed us an area down the first road off the logging road. And he had identified two different areas there where a body may have possibly been burned. It was in one of those areas using that witching technique that I had a hit for bones or for remains. We excavated that site and we did find bones, but it was animal bones. This technique does not discriminate between animal or human. It just says there's bones there. So we found bones in that pit, and then he had showed us another area. And once we cleared that area and raked all the debris off, we didn't see, and I ran the witching rods over it, did not get a hit. So what we used in that area was a different tool, just a soil core. And what we were looking for in the soil core was burn material to show that there may have been a burn there or some disturbed earth. And we didn't find any of that in that area, in that second pit. On the 22nd, Mr. Dukes asked to come back to the area, and because he had realized he had told us the wrong road to go down. So he was brought back over to the pecan orchard by Special Agent Logan Holland, and then he went with me, Mr. Dukes did, and walked me up the hill down the second road and showed me a general area down that second road where this burn may have occurred. It was on the 27th when Mr. Hudson carried us in there. We went down that second road again, and probably 50 yards from where Mr. Dukes had showed me is where Mr. Hudson showed us that the burn had occurred. And it was in this area that I started walking with the rods again. I got a hit where Mr. Hudson had pointed out, but I also had been told that there was some household trash burned in this time span also. So I started walking the general area, and about 20 yards east of where Mr. Hudson had showed us the spot where he thought it was, I saw some household trash. It was like a fork, I think a broken piece of plate, the bottom end, the screw end to a light bulb was all in this area, and I started running the rods in that area and got a hit for a bone also. So on the 27th, all we did was I marked off those areas, and then we came back on the 28th to start excavation of the area.
Now, Agent Crosby, I'm going to show you a series of photographs, and they're marked States Exhibits 43 through 47. I ask you to look at those, please, sir.
What were the numbers?
43 through 47. Are you familiar with what's shown in each of those photographs?
Yes, I am.
Generally, what do each of those photographs show?
This 43 through, State Exhibit 43 through 47 shows that area on the 21st that Mr. Dukes had showed us. It shows the area marked out or gridded off for us to do our search, as well as flags in place, and it also shows where we've cleared the debris from the area and have conducted an excavation of one of the areas.
When we say excavation, kind of what generally do you mean by excavation for the areas?
This is where we go in and we're removing small amounts of dirt. We're actually using small spades, hand spades, or trowels, and we're removing half an inch to an inch of dirt at a time, putting this into a bucket. And the way this generally works, and it's according to how big of an area you're doing, in this case with this first day, we did a 10 foot by 10 foot grid. And those grids, or that area rather, is split off into 4 different quadrants. And you can number them, you can letter them. We lettered these A, B, C, and D. And you also have buckets there with those same letters on the side. So only dirt from quadrant A goes in the A bucket, and dirt from quadrant B. That way, when you're sifting or screening this, because you're sifting and screening this, and in this particular case, we used two different sizes of screens. We screened it through a 1/4-inch size screen first, and we screened it on top of, onto a tarp. Once that one was done, we would remove that 1/4-inch screen, put on an 1/8 of an inch screen, and then rescreen the dirt again. And all that allows you to do is find smaller debris, smaller particles that you may be looking for. And once you get down to what they call virgin earth or undisturbed earth, you stop. Or either when you start finding something, that's when we stop, and that's when we know we're finished with that pit.
Now, with regard to each of these photographs, dates 43 through 47, this was a first location that you were looking at. And did you find anything here in this particular area?
In the first pit we found animal bones. In the second pit, we did not get a hit with this witching technique. And so we just cored it, looking in the core of dirt for burned material or disturbed earth. And we didn't find anything in that one either.
So each of these photographs, states exhibits 43 through 47, truly and accurately depicts the first area location where y'all began the excavation technique.
Yes, it does.
Judge, at this time, I would attend the states exhibits 43 through 47.
No objection.
All right, there a minute.
Now, I'm showing you on that screen, Agent Crosby, states exhibit 43. Tell me what we're looking at here, please, sir.
Yes, sir. This is the first area that Mr. Duke showed us. This is where we've put down the markers or put down those stakes, and then we've made a 10 by 10 square, and we've gridded it off. Those flags that you see there are areas that the witching technique hit on.
States exhibit number 44.
States exhibit number 44, you can see that we have the A, B, C's, and D is over there in the left-hand corner. You see we have the buckets out, and we've raked back this area. And when we do this, we also check that ground debris. So that ground debris is put on top of a tarp, dragged to the side, and somebody is assigned with going through that debris, looking for any pertinent items of evidence.
And states exhibit number 45.
This is where we've excavated down. You can see that it's been dug out around the roots, and all that dirt has been sifted through or screened, looking for evidence. And at this point, we've gotten to the bottom of the pit. Nothing was found here except for those animal bones.
States exhibit number 46.
All right, 46 that you see, that's that second area. The flags in there is where we've been coring. This is where we've cored out earth, and we have looked at those cores, looking for any burnt items or burnt objects in that core.
And states exhibit 47.
And that's the same pit. That's that second pit on that first week that we did just the core samples on.
Now, with regard to these areas, nothing other than animal bones found, is that right?
That is correct.
Now, after that day, I believe you said Mr. Dukes came back on the 22nd of February with Agent Holland and showed you a second area, is that right?
That is correct.
And then you also had Mr. Hudson, Randy Hudson, show you an area close in a location to that area, is that right?
That is correct. On the 22nd, Mr. Dukes walked me up to the second road, showed me an area. I marked it with a flag. And at that time, we decided to wait for Mr. Hudson to come back into the state. He was at a conference or something. It would not be back in until Sunday. That's why we didn't meet with him until the 27th. On the 27th, when he met us there, he carried us to the same general area that Mr. Dukes had taken us to the previous Friday or the previous week. And within 50 yards of where Mr. Dukes had showed us is where Mr. Hudson said this was the area. So that area was marked. It was searched with the rods or with the witching technique, and then started looking around, found the household garbage, and started running the rods in that area and got a hit for bones in that area also.
Now, we talked about this witching technique a little bit. If you will kind of describe for me what you mean by the witching technique.
So when the body ceases to exist, the bone starts generating something called piezoelectricity. And for your benefit, that's piezoelectricity. So it's piezoelectricity. And piezio comes from the Greek word pressure or to confine. So or to constrict. So it's got to be some type of pressure there on the bones. Well, that pressure can be from dirt being on top of the bones. It could be from skin, from decomposition pushing down on the bones. It can be even air pressure pushing down on the bones that generates this piezoelectricity. That in turn generates an electromagnetic field. That electromagnetic field is what's causing the metal rods to cross whenever you go over bone. Again, it does not discriminate between animal or human bone. It just says it's bone.
Now, over the course of your time as a GBI agent and a crime scene analyst, have you used this technique multiple times?
Numerous times.
And how many times would you say that you used it?
Oh, more than 50.
Right. Now, have you brought some things with you here today to demonstrate the technique that you're speaking of?
At your request, yes, sir.
Okay. And tell me what you brought with you.
Well, I got the rods, and these rods, y'all, are nothing more than clothes hangers. It's just metal rods. Also, I brought some straws. I can dig them out of my pocket. And these straws are to keep me from touching the rods. That way, y'all won't think I'm twisting them in my hand. But it's also where they can swing freely. Whenever you're walking, you want them to swing freely. And then in the bag there on the table, there's a box that has bones in it. It's deer bones. It's just teeth from a deer, a couple of small bones that have broken off of the deer.
Now, I'm showing you this white box that was in this brown paper bag. Let me ask you to look at it. Is that what you just described for us?
Yes, sir, it is.
Right. And with both your the hangers with the straws as well as this box here of the bones, would that assist you in demonstrating to the jury this witching technique?
Yes, it would.
Right. Judge, I ask at this time, Mr. Agent Crosby asked to step down.
You may step down.
If I can assist you, Agent Crosby, tell me what I need to do. Otherwise, I'm going to stay out of your way.
I'm going to put them down right here. Can y'all hear me? I'm going to put them here. And you got to be walking, not running, but walking at a brisk pace. You ain't got to walk. You can't stop. You got to keep walking. And when you get over them, you got to walk. So they cross when they get over bone. One of the other ways that you could use this, if you don't know a general area and you're trying to find, and the risk you run with this, if there's, as I'm doing this demonstration, if there's a cemetery out that way, they may cross before I get to the box, so we don't see. But you can stagger them one above the other, and when you get in line with it, the top of them turn. The other thing you can do with them to help you find, as I stand here now, I'm shaking because I'm up here in front of y'all, nervous. So you don't see the rods really going back and forth side to side. But as I get over and I point at the source of the bones, they'll start swinging. Back and forth. So it's just a tool. It's a search tool to help us cut down the size of the area. Whenever somebody said, hey, there may be skeletal remains here, it's just a tool to help us cut down on that search or the size of our search to get a more general location.
Thank you, Agent Crosby. Your Honor, my understanding is some people from the back row may not have been able to see. If I need to, if maybe
Is there anyone that couldn't see?
do it again, if they want to stand up, I can have Agent Crosby do it again. If I need to.
Does anyone raise your hand if you couldn't see? What is it? I think everybody.
Now, Agent Crosby, with regard to this technique that you just demonstrated for the jurors here, did you use this technique at that first site as well?
Yes, I did.
And I think you said you found what appeared to be animal bones there, is that right?
It was identified by the anthropologist, it was animal bones.
Now, with regard to the second location that you went to that identified by Mr. Bowden on the 22nd of February, and then subsequently a general same location by Mr. Hudson on the 27th of February 2017, did you use this technique in that location as well?
Yes, I did.
And after using this technique, what did you find in that location?
Well, on the 27th, after I ran the rods, put down some flags, we decided we needed to call in more agents to assist in this search because of the size of the area. So on the 28th, we all came back together, 57 GBI agents from across the state, to include several administrators, came together in this area where we had gotten the hit on the previous date on the 27th. And we started in Pit 1, and Pit 1 was the area identified by Mr. Hudson and where I'd gotten hit with the rods. And we started excavating that area, and then in that area we also found non-human bones. So we were finished in Pit 1. After we removed that, ran the rods back over the area and didn't get another hit. We'd also started excavating that site where the household trash was. And it was in that area that we saw burned, or the earth was a different color, the dirt was a different color after we excavated everything out. And there was, we did several grids there, finding what was later identified by the anthropologist as human remains. And in that area, we went, there was a fire break there that had been cut over the years for burning the area. And so we went down that fire break also, just out of an abundance of caution, that when the plow came around, if it would have drug any bones down that fire break. So we spent 3 days out there excavating this site. So we had several of those grids that you saw earlier, but we kept on adding on to it just out of an abundance of caution to make sure we had covered that area well.
Agent Crosby, I just want to clarify one point. Most of us are good country boys and understand what a fire break is, but can you explain to us what a fire break is? Sure.
It's an area where the forestry or somebody's come through there with a plow. They have plowed an area down through the trees to keep fire, when they do a controlled burn, from jumping and getting into another section of trees.
Thank you. I'm going to show you several photographs, and that being States Exhibits 48 through 60, and ask if you'll look at each of those, please, sir. Have you had a chance to review each of those photographs?
Yes, I have.
And generally, what do each of those photographs show?
These photographs show the dig started on the 28th of February, and it shows the sites of Pit 1 and Pit 2, and then it shows Pit 2 and how far down we dug, as well as how far out we went in this search.
Do each of those photographs truly and accurately depict that second area where you did excavation, as you've already described for us?
Yes, it does.
Judge, I would tender States Exhibits 48 through 60.
Any objection?
No, sir.
All right, there in a minute.
Crosby is showing you States Exhibit number 48 on the screen. So tell me what we're looking at here.
You can see the fire break down the middle. It's approximate the middle of the picture here. To your right side over here, Mr. Rigby, could you slide that? Yep, that way. Keep on going, please, sir. It's in this general area where you see the blue flag, and behind it, where Mr. Hudson had pointed out the area where he remembered the burn being. So that was the first area where the rods were ran and got a hit for bones being there. And then if you could slide it back the other way, please, sir. And it's in this area on the left-hand side where you see the flags and all, that's where the burn trash, or the trash was, the household trash was, and that's where I started getting hits for bone in that area on that side of the fire break.
State's Exhibit 49.
State's Exhibit 49, again, that's that general area that Mr. Hudson had pointed out whenever he showed us where he remembered the area being, and we're just prepping it. You can see we're getting the tarps out, and we're prepping to get all that ground debris out of there. That way we can search through it and lay out our grid. Again, there's our fire break, and you can still see some of the flags there to your right, or to your left, rather, I'm sorry.
State's Exhibit number 50.
State's Exhibit number 50, this is the actual excavation of Pit 1. This is that area that Mr. Hudson showed us. This is the one where he got a hit. Also, you can see that gray bucket. It's got an A on the side of it. That's what I was talking about earlier. That was quadrant A. It has a specific bucket that goes with it. That way, if we find something in quadrant A while sifting, at least we know what quadrant it came out of. Hold on for a minute, Mr. Reed. The metal pole there in the middle, it's got a T on top, that's that soil core. So as we're going through doing this, that's just another tool that we have available to us. We go through and we core the soil to see if we're picking up any burn material or any remains that may be there that we can pull out of the soil. So that's what I was talking about earlier when I said we were coring the soil. That's the tool we use for that. State's Exhibit 51 is where we have started into Pit 2 now. This is that area where the household trash was found. This is the area where the rods were run and we got a hit for bones. So we're preparing it. We've gotten the ground debris out. And now while one group is over in a corner going through the ground debris, we're starting to remove dirt, and we're starting to sift through it with that 1/4 inch and then 1/8 inch screen. State's Exhibit 52 is just showing the grid itself and that dirt there that's discolored in the middle. State's Exhibit 53, as you can see, there's a change in the dirt and it looks like a diamond. That's a technique we use as we're going through and doing this excavation. And so what we've done is we have dug down maybe a 1/2 inch deeper inside that diamond, closer to that center pole there. And if we find something in that dirt, we know we're in the right grid. We know we're in the right quadrant. So we're cutting our work in half at this point, still searching. Again, this is a search tool, and that's all we're doing is we're searching that dirt as we go through. Eventually, we'll have taken down this whole area right here a couple of inches, just looking for any bones or evidence that was present. And that's just another view of what you just saw, us diamonding out that area. And that's just another angle from what you just saw previously.
State's Exhibit number 55.
All right, State's Exhibit number 55, and you can see the sides of the pit now and how deep we're getting into this pit. The way we normally go about doing these things is once we get, we'll dig another ½ an inch of soil out of this pit. We'll sift it all. If we don't find anything in there, we'll do it one more time just to make sure we're being thorough. If we do it a second time but don't get any evidence or anything out of it, we consider that quadrant as done. So you can see how deep that we're getting down now into the soil looking for these remains and other evidence.
State's Exhibit 56.
And this is just a picture of quadrant F and G, and again, you can see how deep we're getting down. You saw in some of those previous ones the diamond, and I told you we were going to take it all down like that. You can see here that we've taken it all down to the same level. And again, we're going through this, and if we don't find anything, we dig down another ½ an inch, remove another ½ an inch of soil, go through it again just to be thorough. And this is just, again, showing all you quadrants. We ended up with several quadrants, I think all the way up to S or T, once we had taken this all the way down the fire break that we dug out of.
State's Exhibit number 58.
And just another view now, you can see they're all down to the same level, and we're still digging, removing dirt from those areas and sifting or screening through them looking for evidence. This is where we've started expanding. If you were standing in the middle of the pit, in that picture we showed you first, it showed which way the fire break went. Now we've extended all of this down that fire break, down along the edge of the fire break, and this is some of the grids that's down along the edge of the fire break.
State's Exhibit number 60.
Could you pull that down, please? Yes, sir, right there. You see in the background agents working where we're standing at the edge of the original pits, so you can see how far out we took these pits or different quadrants, looking and digging and screening through the earth looking for these remains.
In regard to, there were buckets in each quadrant. Once a bucket was filled, what happened with the dirt from that bucket?
We had several sifting stations set up. Again, we had 57 agents from across the state there on all days that we were doing this. So once dirt was removed from a quadrant, it was taken to a sifting station, and they put a clean tarp or tarp with no dirt on it down up under their sifters, poured the dirt in, sifted through it, looked for the debris, looked for evidence. And then once they finished with that 1/4 inch sift, they take the sifter off, move their stand over, put a new tarp down, put an 1/8 of an inch screen on it, and rescreen all that dirt again. And once it was finished, it was put into one pile.
Now, with regard, we're talking about sifters. Is that going to be similar to what you use for sifting plywood or something like that? Is that kind of something similar to that?
Something similar to this, to that. We had made some out of 2x4s. We had made 2 foot by 2 foot boxes, and we had put hardware cloth on the bottom of it. Some hardware cloth was 1/4 of an inch, others was 1/8 of an inch. And with that, there were eye bolts in the sides of the 2x4s that ran up to a T-piece type stand. That way you could stand there and shake the sifters. Dirt would fall through onto the tarp, and then anything that was big that was left in there, you could actually pick it up, look at it, examine it, take it to the anthropologist, let her look at it and tell you what it was.
Throughout this process there at this second location, you and other agents found items that were taken to the anthropologist for her identification. Is that right?
Correct. She was there with us the whole time.
Thank you. Now, are you familiar with what county that location is in?
I was on Ben Hill.
Okay, thank you. That's incredible.
Mr. Fox, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have no questions for S.A. Crosby.
May be excused, Your Honor.
Any objection to him being excused?
No, Your Honor, not from the state.
All right, you're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You can call your next witness.
The state calls Dr. Alice Goody. Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear affirm the testimony about you before the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, I ask you to pull that microphone up to you a little bit, speak loudly and clearly into it for me. You tell us your name, please, ma'am.
I'm Dr. Alice Gooding.
Just spell your first and last name for the court reporter, please.
It's Alice, A-L-I-C-E, last name Gooding, G-O-O-D-I-N-G.
Thank you, Dr. Gooding. Dr. Gooding, how are you employed?
I'm employed both at Kennesaw State University as an assistant professor of anthropology and as a forensic anthropological consultant with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Now, how long have you been employed in that capacity at Kennesaw State University?
4 years now,
And as a consultant with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, how long have you been doing that?
approximately 3.
Now, if you will give the jury the benefit of your training and experience to allow you to do your job as an anthropologist, please, ma'am.
I've been trained for approximately 7 or 8 years now at this point through the University of Tennessee, where I received my doctorate degree at the Body Farm, which you may be familiar with, where we instruct and learn about clandestine grave recovery.
And over the course of your time and experience, how many sites of clandestine grave recovery have you worked with?
In forensic cases outside of basic training, approximately 10.
All right. And with regard to those cases, what is the purpose of doing a clandestine grave recovery?
The purpose of doing a clandestine grave recovery is to identify what remains are present and recover them while maintaining the integrity of the evidence.
Okay. And kind of what procedures do you use to do that in general?
In general, we will identify the grave through a number of observational techniques. Then we'll excavate it using trowels and other similar excavation tools, screen the dirt and soil, and identify any bone remains that may come out of the grave and any other evidence.
Now, with regard to your time at Kennesaw State University, what classes do you teach there at Kennesaw State?
I teach a lab course in forensic anthropology, introduction to anthropology, anthropology of death class, human origins course, and a laboratory and physical anthropology course.
Now, were you asked to consult with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation involving this case and looking for remains regarding Ms. Tara Grinstead?
Yes, I was.
And how was it that you came to be involved in this case, Dr. Goody?
ASAC Todd Crosby contacted me requesting my assistance.
And did you travel to a location in Ben Hill County to assist the GBI in a clandestine grave recovery?
Yes.
All right. And tell me what you did when you got there and kind of how it proceeded.
The first time I visited the location, I believe that was on the 22nd of February. We went to a single site in a pine-wooded area. The site had already been identified by Todd Crosby and his team as possibly having human bone or bone of some kind. At that point, we excavated using a grid system, which is a common protocol for excavating a grave. Excavated that site, found no human remains, but some cow bone. And then approximately a week later, returned to a second site on the same property and excavated that site to find human remains.
And with regard to, let's just talk about that. The first site that you did excavation on, you said that you had found some cow bones, is that right?
That is correct.
Now, what is it when you're looking at to identify whether the bone is animal or whether it's human? What are you looking for?
We're looking at the size and shape of the bone. We're looking about how much it weighs, how long it is, any bumps or grooves or features that distinguish it from being a cow versus being a human femur.
Now, so that would be the first site. Did you go to a second location?
Yes.
Right. And when was that?
The second location, the 28th of February is when I arrived at the second location.
Now, Dr. Gooding, at the second location, tell me the procedures that you went through at that location.
At the second location, Agent Crosby and his team had already identified an area in which we were going to continue a search. So at that time, I reviewed with him what procedures had taken place, which was already a screening of the topsoil and the ground cover, the leaves, et cetera, had already been screened for any evidence. Then a grid was set up over an area that was marked as a potential burn site. Once we began excavation on that grid, we went down layer by layer. So in anthropology, we work in a flat kind of tabletop manner. So we go down a couple inches at a time. That way we can maintain and figure out where things came from in terms of the layers of the earth.
Dr. Gooding, I'm going to show you just a couple of photographs previously admitted into evidence, that being States Exhibits 53 and 54. I'm asking if you'll look at those, please, ma'am. Are you familiar with what's shown in those photographs?
Yes, I am.
Put them up on the screen for you. So I'm showing you States Exhibit number 53. You kind of generally just tell me what we're looking at here?
What we're looking at here is a center stake out of 4 quadrants, and they're all labeled with alphanumeric names like G and F. And within the, centered around the stake, you can see a diamond-shaped area in which we would have dug a little bit deeper as an area to get a concentrated effort in to recover more.
Now, with regard to each of these, the letters associated with these quadrants here within the diamond, do those correspond later to photographs that you're going to show us of what you recovered?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so with photos later, the letters that we're seeing here on this screen would correspond with where, in what quadrant those items would be found. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, I'm going to show you States Exhibit number 54. It's kind of hard to see on this screen. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what we're looking at here, please, ma'am?
That looks to be the same 4 set of quadrants labeled with similar letters. In the background, I can see individuals, agents who are screening and raking topsoil and leaf debris, and then also a hand screening device, the white plastic device in the corner.
Now, Dr. Gooding, when you're excavating the area, are you able to? How do you know how deep to go within the soil?
So in archaeology and in anthropology, we work until sterile soil, which is soil that has not been disturbed. Some people call it virgin soil. Basically, we work downward in that tabletop layered fashion until you get all the way to soil that you can tell has not been disturbed previously.
Now, with regard to these locations we've been looking at in these photographs, did you also note colorations in the soil?
In these units, we did see what we could call a discoloration of the soil, or an anomaly, a coloration that's different than what you would expect to find there naturally.
Okay, I'm going to show you States Exhibit 53. Does this photograph depict that? But you may need to see it on here.
Thank you. Yes, we're looking in the two upper units, J and I, and also some into G and F. There is a discoloration of the soil.
And what did the discoloration of the soil indicate to you?
An area that had previously been burned.
Now, throughout the day that you were there, I believe on February 28th, were you asked to look at items found within some of these, or each of these quadrants that were found, to determine whether or not they were human or animal bone or some other item?
Yes, I was physically digging, so every item that was found either by myself or later found by those at the screens I saw.
Now, with regard to those items, what did you do with those items once you saw them?
So once an item had been identified as potentially being osseous or potentially being bone, it was set aside, and those items were bagged and cataloged on site.
And I think you just gave us the definition, but I just want to make sure you said something was osseous. Can
Right.
you tell me what you mean by osseous?
Osseous just means it's of bone. It's made of bone.
And then those were set aside, is it right?
That's correct.
And why did you set them aside?
We set them aside because there was a whole bunch of other debris found with them, other evidence, trash items, metallic, plastic items. We wanted to keep the bone separate from the trash, essentially.
Now, with regard to those particular items, that being what was osseous or bone, did you have a chance to examine those items and take photographs of those items?
The items were examined and photographed on site and later back in a laboratory setting.
And what was the purpose of photographing them in a laboratory setting?
Better lighting, better camera, stronger analysis.
Dr. Gooding, I'm going to show you a series of photographs, those being State's Exhibits 63 through 90. I'm just going to ask you to kind of look through each of those as a whole at this point. Are you familiar with what is shown in each of those photographs?
Yes, I am.
And generally, what do each of those photographs show?
They're all fragments of human remains.
And with regard to each of those photographs, do they truly and accurately depict the human remains or the osseous bone material found from the clandestine grave site as we've seen in the prior photographs?
Yes, that's correct.
Your Honor, at this time I would tender into evidence State's Exhibits 63 through 90.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, there in a minute.
Now, Dr. Gooding, I'm showing you State's Exhibit number 63. Try to, Now, as we're looking at State's Exhibit number 63, there, here in this location as well as this location here, tell me what we're looking at there and what that means to describe this piece of bone here.
So Unit F refers to the unit, the square unit that we saw in the prior picture where the item was found.
Now, would that be, in this photograph showing you State's Exhibit number 53, is that within this diamond, that place to the right?
That's correct.
regard to the levels, what does that indicate?
The levels indicate those kind of tabletop layers that we move down in through the soil. So the first layer through the fifth is where this particular fragment was found. And it's the first, item 1, indicating it's the first fragment found from that unit in those levels.
And what can you tell us about this piece of osseous material?
This is a human hand bone fragment, so it's one of the proximal hand phalanges, which is one of the first, kind of before the first knuckle.
Showing you State's Exhibit number 64. And what are we looking at here?
This is the same fragment, just flipped so you can see the other side of it.
So this would also be,
This is the same human hand phalanx fragment.
State's Exhibit number 65. So tell us what we're looking at here, please, ma'am.
This is a second human proximal hand phalanx, so it's again a portion of a piece of hand, not coming from the one in the prior photograph.
State 66.
This is the same fragment flipped over to view the other side of it.
State's Exhibit number 67.
This is a portion of the cranial bone called the occipital, which is here in the back of your skull, and this is a small fragment of that bone.
And with regard to these bones, what could you tell about these bones with regard to what had happened to them?
I could tell they'd been burned.
How is it that you could tell they had been burned?
The color and the weight of the bones indicates burning. They're gray and black, bluish, all varying in colors, which are indicative of being burned.
Item 68, or State's Exhibit 68.
This is the same fragment that has been flipped over for viewing on the other side.
State's Exhibit number 69.
This is another human occipital bone, so it's another fragment from the back of the skull.
State's Exhibit number 70.
And again, the same bone flipped over.
State's Exhibit 71.
This is a piece of a human vertebra, so it's one facet where the two vertebrae meet one another in your spinal column.
State's Exhibit 72.
And that's the same fragment flipped over where you can actually view the facet.
You just used a word there. If you will, tell us what you mean by that.
The facet or the facet is where the two vertebrae kind of high five as they're hanging on to one another in your spinal column.
State's Exhibit number 73.
This is a fragment of a human cervical vertebra, which is one of the vertebrae in your neck.
State's Exhibit 74.
And that's the same fragment flipped over.
States Exhibit 75.
This is a human tooth showing the crown and the root. This is the same tooth flipped over to see the other side. It's an adult human tooth.
77.
These are two fragments of an adult human tooth. It's the same tooth and small fragment flipped over. This is a molar root, so one of your back teeth, the root of one of your back teeth. And that's the same fragment flipped over. These are two fragments associated with one another, which means they go together, and they are a portion of the end of your humerus, which is this big arm bone here, right at the elbow.
States Exhibit number 82.
That's those two fragments at that elbow region that have been flipped over.
States Exhibit number 83.
This is a fragment of a human foot phalanx, which is the same first bone, but in the foot as rather than in the hand.
States Exhibit number 84.
And that's the same fragment flipped on the other side.
States Exhibit number 85.
These are three associated fragments, which means they all go together from a portion of the human skull, from the cranium.
States Exhibit number 86.
Those are those same three fragments flipped to the other side.
States Exhibit number 87.
These are three associated fragments that go together, also a portion of the human cranium, so around the brain.
States Exhibit number 88.
Same as the previous three fragments, just flipped over.
States Exhibit number 89.
This is a fragment of the human temporal bone, which are the bones on the side of your skull here.
And States Exhibit number 90.
That is the same side of the skull bone that has just been flipped over, so you can see the outside of it.
Dr. Gooding, with regard to each of these photographs and bones that we've looked at and talked about, did each of these bones indicate that they had been burned?
Yes.
And Dr. Gooding, with regard to human bones and burning human bones, how hot would a fire have to be to burn human bones?
That's very temperature dependent and dependent on the body itself and what remains of the body. To get to this degree of burning, it would have to be a very hot fire.
Any idea what kind of degree that would have to be?
The general threshold is 1,200 degrees for a typical bonfire that would reduce a body to what we would call cremated remains, which are what we found in this case.
Now, with regard to each of those bones that we talked about, are related with those photographs, all relating to a human being, is that right?
That's correct.
Judge, I did not formally intend your not forgetting as an expert in her field, but I failed to do that. But
Any objection?
we are satisfied that she's an expert.
All right, she's admitted as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have anything further.
Your Honor, we don't have any cross-examination.
All right, you may step down.
Thank you.
All right, members of the jury, we're going to take a short recess, so if you'll make yourselves comfortable in the jury or anything.
May I be released for my subpoena?
Mr. Rigby, can she be excused?
Yes.
For my subpoena, thank you.
Please, thank you, sorry.
Thank you very much.